Hello and welcome to Hawk Mountain Sanctuary's Home Discovery Series. Today's program is Pennsylvania Mammals with Dan Lynch, Wildlife Education Specialist and Deputy Game Warden of the Pennsylvania Game Commission.
Hi, Jamie.
Thanks so much for joining us today, Dan.
I'm really happy to be here.
Yay! My name is Jamie Dawson. I'm the Director of Education at Hawk Mountain Sanctuary, and we are so glad that you are joining us today. As you may know, Hawk Mountain is the world's very first refuge for birds of prey, and we continue to work hard to be leaders in raptor conservation, science, and education, locally and globally around the world. Hawk Mountain is a private nonprofit, and membership is the lifeblood of our organization. To all of our members, thank you so very much for your continued support. And if you're joining us today and you're not a member, we hope that you consider becoming one in the future. Hawk Mountain hopes that everyone remains safe and healthy during these times of COVID challenges, and we are thrilled to offer our local and global community a variety of free virtual programming. As always, Hawk Mountain greatly appreciates and depends on donations. Just so everyone is aware, today's program is being recorded. The video will then be accessible on Hawk Mountain's YouTube channel as a continued resource. We also have a link on our website directly connecting you to our YouTube channel. At any point during today's program, viewers may submit questions through the Q&A feature on the Zoom platform. We've designated time at the end of the program to take some questions from the audience. And we are so excited that Dan Lynch is joining us today to share with us his knowledge and expertise on Pennsylvania mammals and wildlife. And before we go further, I'd like to take a moment to share some of Dan's background experience with our audience. Dan Lynch is a wildlife education specialist and deputy game warden for the Pennsylvania Game Commission in the Southeast region. He has been involved in wildlife education for 25 years and teaches a variety of classes, including wildlife sign and tracking, bird and mammal identification, wildlife forensics, hunter and trapper education, and many others. Dan has been involved in all aspects of the Game Commission. In addition to the education aspects, he has experience with bear processing, dove and waterfowl trapping and banding, nuisance wildlife management, turkey trapping, and working with numerous other wildlife species. Dan is an avid outdoorsman and is actively involved in fishing, hunting, trapping, camping, and hiking. And I would like to personally add that I have attended many of Dan's education workshops and education programs over the years, and they are so fun. And what really stands out in my mind, Dan, is your awesome sense of humor that shines through during your education programs that makes it so enjoyable. So Dan, how did you become interested in the field of wildlife education?
Well, Jamie, I've always had that kind of interest in my background, and my first real job after college was teaching. I taught agriculture at Kutztown High School in Berks County, and a lot of my students got involved with the Game Commission doing like shadow days where they shadow a game warden. They'd come back and tell me all these cool things that they did, and I started thinking, man, that'd be kind of a cool thing to do. And so that kind of worked out that there was a job opening about 25 years ago, and I applied for the job, and I lucked out, and I've been with the agency ever since, and I really enjoy my job. There's a lot of really cool things that I get to do.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And Deputy Game Warden, that sounds pretty serious.
It can be.
What are some of your responsibilities with that?
So as a deputy game warden, so you're a warden for anywhere in the state, but for the most part you work in a particular district, and my district is in northeastern Berks County. So 1/3 of Berks County is where I primarily work. And so we're out checking and making sure hunters are following the law. We make sure that, if people have problems with wildlife, whether it's crop damage on a farm, or just maybe people are feeding wildlife, which is kind of a huge problem. That's how, there's really no such thing as a nuisance wildlife. Sometimes I always say there's nuisance people, and we don't really trap and transfer people, but we try to educate them so that, they kind of leave the critters alone, and they're trying to do the right thing. They want to help wildlife, but sometimes feeding them just isn't the best thing that they can do. So we do a lot of education, but we do law enforcement. I mean, that's primarily what I do as a deputy, is law enforcement. And we have hunting seasons almost year round. So as deputies and as salaried officers, we do a lot of training all year round. And we have to keep up certain requirements for firearms and unarmed self-defense and those kinds of things. And it's kind of like having 2 full-time jobs, but I enjoy it.
Well, that's great. It's definitely obvious you enjoy your work, and you're definitely a busy guy. So would you mind talking just a little bit about your connection with Hawk Mountain Sanctuary?
Sure. I have always had a great connection with Hawk Mountain. I'm pretty sure that while I was teaching, or maybe even before teaching, I had been to Hawk Mountain a couple of times and hiking out the trails and to the lookouts. But since I've been with the Game Commission for, I'm sure, 25 years now, I've been helping either help teach workshops or kind of facilitate workshops up at Hawk Mountain, all different kinds, not just related to raptors or mammals or anything. We've done some reading sign, tracking wildlife, and I'm sure we're going to do more. I'm excited when we sort of get back to normal that we can actually do more workshops. But it's cool when I get to work with someone like you, Jamie. So you built me up, I'll build you up a little bit. You're a fun person to work with, and you're obviously into your job, and it makes co-facilitating so much easier when the person is into it, and people want to come to Hawk Mountain. It's such a cool place, and you have a nice classroom, but it's nice to get outside, and there's so many cool places to hang out at Hawk Mountain. So I think we've had a great relationship, and I hope we will continue to do that.
Oh, absolutely. And likewise, Dan, thank you so much. So I think we've got a large audience. They are anxious to hear about the mammals of Pennsylvania, Dan, so I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, cool. Okay, so with the Game Commission, one of the things that we do is we're involved with wild animals. So we don't have any cages. We don't keep anything captive or anything like that. We specifically deal with wild animals. And so we don't really do programs with, live critters. It's rare. Sometimes we do. The only time I can think of that I've really done anything with a live critter would be if it was a bear that we had caught in a trap, and then we were going to, release it again, and we were going to process the bear, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. But for the most part, we're doing programs with what I call pelts, parts, and pieces. So that's kind of what I have today. And let me see if I can click this, because right now all I see is a tiny little thing there. There we go. Maybe that's better. Okay. I have a lot of these pelts along with me today to talk about mostly the common critters that we have in Pennsylvania. We have them in most of these critters in all the counties of Pennsylvania. We have 67 counties in Pennsylvania. Here in the Southeast, my main responsibility for education is in the 12 southeastern counties. So from Philadelphia to Northampton County, all the way over to Dauphin, back down to Lancaster, and that loop right in there. So those 12 southeastern counties. Most of the species that I'm going to talk about today, we have in all of those southeastern counties. And I thought I would start by talking a little bit about the 3 canines, the wild canines that we have in Pennsylvania. So the first critter is a coyote or coyote. You can say it however you want to. But we have coyotes in all 67 counties. One thing I do want to make clear is that the Game Commission doesn't stock coyotes. So I've been with the Game Commission for 25 years, but I've been hunting ever since I was 12, and I've always heard those stories. Oh, the Game Commission must stock coyotes because they want to get rid of the deer. Well, if that's the case, we're not doing a really good job, because we have had a whole lot of deer in Pennsylvania, and but we also have a lot of coyotes in Pennsylvania too. So this is a critter that kind of like what I would consider is determinant of his own destiny. You can hunt coyotes 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, with a light, with an electronic call, with bait. We are not concerned in Pennsylvania too much about the over-harvesting of coyotes, because they're not that easy to kill. They're pretty secretive, especially if they start being pursued by hunters. They become very nocturnal. They don't have to be nocturnal. A lot of these species that in Pennsylvania that we consider nocturnal are simply nocturnal because we're so active during the day. They would be active during the day, except there's too much of human activity around, so they tend to come out at night. But this particular pelt is what I would consider like a German Shepherd type color, but they come in like 5 or 6 different phases. They come this phase, they come much lighter, like a blonde. They come red, black, brown, and all mixes in between. They normally have this nice bushy tail right here, and normally one indicator, if you're looking at something, you're not sure if it's a coyote or a domestic dog, is that most coyotes have a straight tail, whether it's held completely straight out from the rear end there or slightly down, but it is not curled. This is a sign of a domestic dog when you see a curled tail. So lots of times people, they don't want to believe they saw a coyote. Well, I don't know why you wouldn't want to believe it, because we've got them in downtown Philadelphia and Fairmount Park, and we've got them up in the middle of Game Lands 211 in Lebanon County, where there's thousands and thousands of acres of woods and not very many people around. These guys will inhabit just about any habitat. They're what I would call an opportunistic omnivore. So an omnivore, most people know what that is, but let's just pretend you're going to McDonald's. If you're an omnivore, you're most likely going to get a Big Mac. You're going to eat the whole Big Mac. You're going to eat the burger, the bun, the lettuce, the tomatoes, everything. If you're a herbivore in the animal world, you get the Big Mac, you're going to throw the meat out and eat everything else. And if you're a carnivore, a true carnivore, you're just going to eat the meat and nothing else. There aren't a lot of true carnivores in Pennsylvania. I'm going to talk about a few of them today, but this guy is definitely an omnivore. He'll eat both meat and plants, live or dead, something as small as a grasshopper and as big as a white-tailed deer. So when you have that type of prey base in your menu, you're probably going to do really well. I like to tell people that if you were an animal that only ate red squirrels on Tuesdays, and a couple of Tuesdays roll by and you don't get any red squirrels, you're in trouble. This guy, however, can eat anything at any time. And, they can eat deer their whole life and not actually have to kill one, simply because of so many that are laying alongside the road that we end up hitting with cars and trucks. And so I also tell people it's much easier to sneak up on a dead one than it is to catch your own. And you don't expend a lot of energy to eat something that's already dead. So a lot of animals that I'm going to talk about eat carrion or dead things. So this is the coyote. And he's got 2 cousins. 2 of the canine cousins would be a red fox, which is this guy right here, and a gray fox. And in most counties, actually all counties of Pennsylvania, we have reds. But for grays, in some counties, they may only be in more of the heavily forested parts of the county, if they are in every county. These guys do have a different habitat than the fox, than the red and the coyote. They do prefer more wooded habitat. That does not mean that you would not be able to see one in the middle of a field, because you could, but they do have a preferred habitat. They also have one adaptation that the coyote and the reds do not have, and that is that the gray fox does have the ability to climb a tree. So that's advantageous to an animal that will eat birds and eggs out of a nest, as well as for an escape route if you're going to be eaten by something like a much larger cousin like a coyote that can't climb a tree. This dude can climb a tree and possibly get away. Now, he's not going to climb a tree like a raccoon or a bear. He can't just grasp hold of it and go right up. But if it's rough barked, low-hanging branches, things like that, it's not uncommon to find a gray going into a tree and just seeing one in a tree. They have a vantage point to look for prey and to avoid being prey by being able to get up in that tree. So those are the canines. I have a lot of critters to talk about, so I don't want to take too much time on each one. So if we were a live crowd here, I would be telling you that this is a Pennsylvania chipmunk, and usually people's heads would be like, what are you talking about? So it's kind of tough because I can't see anybody. I can't tell if you're laughing. Hopefully you are. This is not a chipmunk. This is white-tailed deer. Pretty common looking hide. The top of the hide is dark brown along the sides, and then when you get down to the belly, it's white. The underside of the tail is white, usually the underside of the neck, and then inside the ears and under the face are normally white on a whitetail. So that's a common coloration. Sometimes you'll get them with large patches of white. We call that a piebald, and sometimes all white with pink features on the face, which would be an albino. But it's rare. They're not, as common as a piebald, and certainly not as common as a regular whitetail. This particular hide is a winter taken hide, and I can tell that simply because it's very, very thick and it's dark brown. Right now in June, when you're checking out whitetails, you'll see they're very reddish in color. If you were very close to them, you'd actually see that they rub a lot of the hair off. They're attacked by flies and different types of insects, so they're constantly rubbing their head and their neck because that's where the insects are attacking them. And you'll see a lot of black streaks, and that's basically just the skin coming through because they rub the hair off. That hair is red and it's very thin. And then in the winter, they'll lose all that red hair in the fall, and they'll get this dark brown hair in the winter that's much thicker. All the hairs are hollow. It lays down on top of the deer's body to hold a pocket of air in there so that they can regulate their body temperatures. So with the deer, besides the pelt, I do have a set of antlers here. So currently, in June now, if you see a whitetail, they may be this big, but they're not going to be hard yet. They're going to have the hair, which we call velvet, but it's not velvet. It's just hair. It feels like velvet when you touch it. The hair on the antlers, and this antler is simply a bone. It's the fastest growing bone known to man. Grows from nothing on the deer's head to hard antler in 4 months, which is pretty amazing. And then this bone will stay on the deer, let's say, so they start growing in late April, beginning of May. They stop growing end of August, middle of September is when they stop. And they obviously there's a leeway that everybody doesn't stop growing at the same time. They stay hard sometimes till December, maybe even till March. And then the white-tailed, the bucks, the males will lose their antler. They'll literally fall off. The males will look like the females until late April, beginning of May, start with a little tiny bump on the head, and it'll start growing. And this is we call a typical branching of a whitetail. It's got a main beam. It's got points that come off of it. Sometimes they have little funky tips that come off of a point or ones that go down. But that's just based on the DNA of that particular breeding of that buck. So this is a hard antler, and you'll see this mid-September into late September that'll turn hard like this. Right now, when you see whitetails in June, usually you're going to see does and fawns together out in a field, and you're going to see bachelor groups of bucks. They hang out together. They usually don't come out early normally like the does do. They stay in the shade, and then they'll all come out together, and you'll see a whole bunch of them together. September, October rolls around, they separate and get away from those bachelor groups and start thinking about breeding, and then the whole thing happens all over again after they drop their antlers. So these are antlers. They're not horns, though. A horn is hollow and stays on the animal its whole life. This one falls off every year, and they grow a new set. Talk about some of the other critters that I have with me here. This guy's kind of cool. So if you can kind of see the way this one is laid out here, when they're skinned open compared to the coyotes, which are called case skinned. So they're turned inside out like you take a sock off. Beavers, which is what this guy is, are skinned open and spread out and then stretched on either a board or a wire to prepare the hide for either tanning or to make something out of it or whatever. So we have beavers in Pennsylvania. We have beavers in just about every county of Pennsylvania. It's the largest rodent in North America. So this guy's related to a mouse. So you would not want something as big as a 50 or 60 pound mouse running around your attic, but this is a rodent just like that mouse. And they're kind of a really interesting critter. Now these guys are herbivores. They eat strictly plants. They do not eat wood. People think that they eat wood, but they do not. Here's an example of a already eaten piece of tree limb. This is what's left. This is what the beaver is not going to eat. This is the wood. If they ate the wood, then I would not be holding this thing. They would have eaten it all. It's very, very small. They could easily eat that. What they're doing, though, is they're eating the bark down to the cambium layer, the living tissue, and they literally put it in their mouth and spin it around like we eat an ear of corn. And all the little incisor marks from the beaver's teeth are on this piece of wood. We call this a peeler because they have peeled all of it off. And it's a great sign if you're in an area and you see a bunch of these bright white, almost yellow or golden laying along in the bank or up in the shallow water. That's evidence of a active beaver in the area. Once this is sitting out for a while in the sun, it will turn brown and you won't see any of the yellowish color at all. But if you see what we call a peel or something bright white like this, that's a pretty active sign of a beaver. So they eat the bark, they eat leaves, they eat aquatic plants, aquatic roots. They cut down trees because they can't climb them. They can't climb them because their hind feet are webbed. And seem to have lost my beaver foot here somewhere. Oh, no, I got it right here. So I got my beaver. This is a hind foot, a real hind foot of a beaver. And you can see that there's webbing in between the toes. One thing that's interesting about beavers is they have 5 toes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but this one right here is split. It's pretty hard to see that, but it's a split toenail, kind of like this. And what's interesting about that is it's an adaptation that beaver has. They use that particular tooth to comb their entire body, and they comb any dirt or brush or anything that's inside of their hair out. And they also squirt a gland of what we call castor onto their front paws, put it on their hair, and then they use that one toenail on each foot to comb it through their body to waterproof their coat. So we do the same thing with like a baseball glove, a new baseball glove, or something that's leather that we want to be a little bit more supple, more pliable and waterproof. We might get beeswax or mink oil and we rub it into the leather. Well, we got that kind of stuff from animals who've been doing that a lot longer than we've been playing baseball, most likely. But the beaver does that as well. And so they're kind of cool. One other thing about beavers, besides the hind feet, and the front feet are not webbed. They look just like our hand, except it's not a thumb. It's 5 toes. And the stick and the foot is a tail. So this is a fake tail. It gives you the shape of one, kind of looks like a hot water bottle. It's pretty flat, kind of thicker at the top. So a lot of people think the tail is used to like build the dam, like they put mud on it and build it, and then that's not true at all. That's a cartoon beaver. Real beavers use it for a couple different things, but it's not for building things like that. They use it for swimming, so it's an excellent flipper or rudder. They will slap the water when they sense some sort of danger, and people like to say, well, they're trying to let their young ones know. Well, we don't really know because we're not beavers, but what we do know is this. If other beavers hear the slap of the tail and they don't head into the water and they stay on the bank, some of them are going to get eaten. So they do learn that when they hear that, somebody in the family senses something's not up, and smart beavers, those that want to live, will head into the water. And so we do know that. They also use this to regulate temperature, so they can regulate their temperature through their tail. They also use it as a fat storage device. So in the fall, beavers start eating a lot more of twigs and bark, the bark off of the twigs, and cutting down trees and things like that. And their tail will get fatter and fatter. And then through the winter, if they happen to have a lodge on a lake or a pond that freezes over, they make kind of like what we call a food cache. It's kind of like the refrigerator. So they take a whole bunch of food before winter and they shove it down into the mud in front of their lodge, 10, 15 feet away. Then it freezes over and they can't get out and climb on the bank. So they will swim down, chew whatever they can off. As winter progresses, that food starts to get stale. If they start to run out of food, they will absorb fat from their tail in hopes to survive until the ice breaks and they can get out. So it's kind of an interesting thing, but it's not used as a trowel to build things. They use their front feet for the most part to build everything with their dam, holding sticks and mud on their front feet and sticks in their mouth. Jump through a couple other critters here real quick. So this guy here is kind of long, very long and slender, short, dense fur with a furry tail. This is an otter. So we have otters in Berks County as well, and most parts of Pennsylvania. One of our true carnivores. So this guy has teeth that are set up with very pointy, he's got sharp incisors, pointy canines, and then all of the molars are pointy as well. They are not flattened. Flattened molars normally means a omnivore, or completely flat molars and no canines means a herbivore. This guy is a true carnivore. So he's going to either find something dead to eat or catch his own meal and eat it. This guy can catch things on land and water, eats a lot of fish, snakes, frogs, turtles, muskrats, baby beavers, He can catch things on land as well. He's super fast on land. So he's kind of an interesting critter, but that's the otter. No particular order how I'm grabbing these pelts. Excuse me. This is a what we call Pennsylvania speed bump. So many people have seen them just like this, laid flat out on the road, but his real name is possum. He's interesting because he's about the only animal that I know of that you can start with a P or an O and still be correct. It is correct to call him a possum, and it is correct to call him an opossum. I don't know any other animal you could start with two different letters and be correct. So the opossum is our only marsupial in North America. If you were here, I'd ask you that question. But a marsupial is an animal that carries its baby in a pouch. So we have marsupials in other countries, especially Australia. They have like 6 of them, including an opossum, which looks different than this. But here in North America, this is our only marsupial that is native. And so the female possum has this pouch down here, and she can have 23 babies at a time. They're born premature. They are only attached to the uterus for about 3 weeks before they're actually born. So they come out as a tiny little pinky, about the size of a honeybee. They crawl to the heat, and the heat is coming out of the pouch. Inside there are nipples. They eat the first 13 that grab onto the 13 nipples in there have a chance of surviving. The other 10 are not going to make it. She has more than she has room for to try to make sure that she has a big litter. Because when you have a large litter, you normally have a high mortality rate, which means death. So a lot of the 13 are not going to make it anyhow. But she tries to start with a big litter because a lot of critters are going to get eaten. So kind of a cool animal. If you see them on the road, slow down. They're all doing us a favor. They're out there eating the dead things. And then you just got to slow down so you don't make them a dead thing. If you do make them a dead thing, though, another possum is going to probably come along and eat that one. So something to think about. This guy here is not common in every county in Pennsylvania. So he's related to the otter, same family. The family is the weasel family. This guy's way bigger than a weasel. This is a fisher. So people will call them a fisher cat, but they are not a cat at all. They're not related to a cat at all. They're a weasel. They just happen to have a coat that is more, I guess I would call it terrestrial, more like a red fox, long guard hairs as opposed to short fur like an otter, because they don't spend a lot of time in the water. They spend a lot of time in the trees. They like to hunt squirrels, especially red squirrels. They eat chipmunks, gray squirrels, snowshoe hares, rabbits, groundhogs, chickens. If you have a bunch of chickens running around, free-range chickens, you're not going to want to have a free-range fisher around, or you're not going to have any more chickens left. They will eat them all. It happens a lot. But he's kind of a cool critter. Every critter that I talked about so far, they're not endangered or threatened. We have a hunting and or trapping season 4. We have a lot of them. Fishers and otters, licensed trappers can only take 1 per year, but we do have a bunch of them. So real quick, since I talked about weasels, I should at least show you what a weasel is. So this is one version of a weasel. This is a long-tailed weasel. And this would be a winter coat. Sometimes they turn into this winter coat. So it's the same weasel, long-tailed. This one, however, we call an ermine. So it's an ermine phase. It turns white, which is something you only want to do in the wintertime when there's snow on the ground. So it's in the wintertime and there's no snow and you turn white, there's a really good chance something's going to eat you because you're going to stand out really well and not be quite as camouflaged as something that's both brown and white. So that's a weasel. Another critter in the same family would be the mink. So the mink is definitely bigger than the weasels. By the way, there's 3 weasels. There's a long tail, short tail, and the least. Least weasel is the smallest, about a third of this size, and he's also endangered, and I do not have a skin to show you. So this is a small mink. They get a little bit bigger than that, but it looks like a miniature version of an otter. It looks almost identical to an otter. So all the members of the weasel family are true carnivores. They're our only carnivores, except for the next critter that I'm going to show you, and that is our only feline in Pennsylvania, and that is a bobcat. And I did say that. He's our only feline in Pennsylvania, for all of those of you who have seen a mountain lion. I'm not saying we couldn't have them. I'm just saying we don't have any good evidence of them, except for people saying, yep, I saw one. We have people that have them in cages, but I'm pretty sure if they were running around, we'd have pictures of them somehow, or somebody would shoot one, or somebody would hit one with a car, or somebody would find a kitten, somebody would find a kill. That hasn't happened in I don't know how long. So this guy we do have, though, and you see how short his tail is. A big one's maybe 35, 40 pounds, and he's definitely cat-like. You see that pretty good, the whiskers up there. And he's also a true carnivore. So his last molars in the back are pointed, therefore tearing meat, crushing bone, stuff like that. He's not eating a lot of plants. So we do have bobcats. This is a critter you should probably know if you don't know any of the others, and that is a skunk. The reason you should know him is that if you're in your backyard and he's looking at you this way, things are cool. If you're in your backyard, he's looking at you this way, things are not cool. He's basically saying you're way too close. You need to back up. So he gives you a warning. First off, he's black and white. So black and white is not camouflage. Black and white is the opposite of camouflage. It's to stand out. He's the only animal that's black and white. He wants you to see him so that you don't mistake him for something else. If you need to learn the lesson, he will teach you a lesson. He's an excellent teacher. Normally only needs to teach you this one time. Your dog, probably more than one time. But you, hopefully just one time. So if you do see one and his tail's up, do not run away screaming. He will immediately spray. Do not stand there screaming or you're going to get it as well. My suggestion is to talk in a normal tone like I'm talking to you right now. You can say any conversation you want, like please don't spray me, please don't spray me, do whatever you want, but don't scream, please don't spray me, or you're done. But usually if you calmly talk to a skunk, you will quickly see that tail go right back down again. And then you can slowly walk away. But they are trying to let you know that you're just too close. If you do decide you want to see if I'm correct or not, he will turn around and look to see where you are and line you up completely. He will squeeze his back legs together, arch his tail, and he could shoot a half ounce of liquid 16 feet in a cone. You can smell that a mile away. So, yeah, he's pretty potent. And a young skunk, baby, real small skunk, they need literally no reason to do it. They will just do it because it's probably fun to do. And they can immediately spray right afterwards. It's not the old, well, he sprayed once, he won't spray again. That's completely false. He will spray another time or 2 or 3 more times. Okay, so that's the skunk. If you see them in your yard this time of the year, many times you will see little holes dug in the yard. Basically, you have grubs, maybe June beetles, those big white beetles with brown head, Japanese beetle larvae. They sense them in the yard, and they're going to dig them up, and you'll see all these tiny little holes. That's probably a skunk. If you see the grass, especially if you spend a lot of money and you have rolled turf, this guy here will unroll the turf for you. This is a raccoon, and they also love those June bugs and June beetles and the other types of larvae. And they are much more dexterous with their paws, and they will actually roll your lawn up as if it, if it came that way. So raccoons are very, very common. All these critters are actually common in Pennsylvania. None of these animals you should pick up if you see them. If you see an injured one, you could call the Pennsylvania Game Commission. If it's an injured bird, you could call Hawk Mountain as well. You could call a wildlife rehabilitator, but you should not pick them up. And the last thing you should ever do is feed them. If they are injured, the last thing they need to do is eat. So there's no reason to do that. And if they are sick, they may not be aggressive. They may be just the opposite of aggressive. And they could be sick, and you could get some sort of transmission, either rabies, Lyme's, distemper, all the things that you get your pets inoculated for. You do that in case they come in contact with a wild animal that happens to be sick, so that your pet has a much better chance of surviving it than if he or she was not, given the rabies vaccination. So just because you see any of these animals out during the day does not mean they are sick. That is totally false. If you are a mother raccoon and you've got 6 or 7 little ones there, you may want to leave your log to go get some me time and find some food. So if it happens to be 11 o'clock in the morning, you don't carry little raccoon watches. You have no idea what time it is. So just because you humans see them, they call our office all the time. They're like, saw a raccoon at 10 o'clock in the morning, must have rabies. Why? What was it doing? Well, it was out at 10 o'clock in the morning. Means nothing. Means the animal was out in 10 o'clock in the morning. If he's walking around in circles, foaming at the mouth, looks like his hair is all disheveled, chasing somebody, that's pretty good evidence that something's wrong. Still doesn't mean he has rabies. You can only test for rabies currently by killing the animal and having the brain tested. So if, heaven forbid, you get in some sort of confrontation and you decide you need to dispatch that animal, the last thing you want to do is shoot him in the head, because that's what we need to test. Best thing to do would be to get you and your pets away, contact somebody, including your health professional, and find out what you should do. So I usually talk about that when I talk about raccoons, because they're super common at this time of the year, especially when they're babies. They're only about this big. They're super cute. People want to pick them up. They want to hold them. It's a total bad idea. A, it's illegal. You're not allowed to do it. And B, your safety is more important than this guy's safety. And we want to make sure if you come in contact with him and something bad happens and we come, there's a good chance we're going to have to dispatch this animal to get him tested. But if you didn't touch him at all, maybe we can just move him on or move him out of the area or whatever. So the best thing to do is to not touch the wildlife. Just try to give somebody a call and see if we can help you out. So I'm definitely going to talk about this critter so I don't run out of time. So we'll start out normally talking about the skull of this guy. Normally when I show them that, if it's a real young kid anyhow, they'll be like, oh, it's a dinosaur. And I don't know why people don't realize that all of us have skulls, but this is not a dinosaur. Most of them were way bigger than this. And this is from a Pennsylvania black bear. And so this black bear is a true omnivore, just like we are. We have the same teeth. We've got these incisors in the front. We've got canines, and they have canines, and we have molars. And a bear's molars are very, very flat, just like ours. So a bear, even though it can be a huge critter, about 70 to 80% of its diet is made of plant material, which makes sense. You do not expend any energy to sneak up on a plant. You can eat a lot of it and not expend energy, and you get a lot of energy back. Or if this big dude is trying to chase down a little chipmunk, by the time he catches it, it's like eating one potato chip. No one's ever eaten one potato chip. There's so much energy to get something so little. But if you can eat grubs, insects, plants, roadkill deer, drag a whole roadkill deer off the road and eat it, then they don't spend a lot of energy doing it. And they need a lot of energy, especially when they go into the fall, because they're going to go into a den. They're not true hibernators. They can wake up in the wintertime, not like a groundhog or a chipmunk or a bat, which is a true hibernator. But they do put on a lot of pounds in the fall, gearing up for a wintertime, a dormant sleep for 3 or 4 months. Also at that time, the female is going to have her cubs. So she needs to eat a lot to make sure she has a lot of energy and she doesn't have to wake up a whole lot of times when she's going to have cubs in, say, January. So this is a pretty decent size black bear. And you can see they could pretty much eat whatever they want in Pennsylvania. That's definitely the largest skull that we have in Pennsylvania. Fortunately, in Pennsylvania, bears are really, really cool when it comes to most people. They learn to adapt to live around us. They don't normally cause a lot of problems. We're the ones who cause the problems. We feed bears. It's illegal. You're not allowed to do it. If a bear is coming to your bird feeder, you are now feeding bears. So if you want to just feed birds, they're normally going to come at night, normally. So the birds come during the day. So leave the bird feeder out, then clean it all up, especially stuff on the ground, and just put the bird feeder out during the day. Or, crazy idea, don't feed birds during the summertime because they probably don't need it anyhow, and just wait till the bear probably isn't going to be around. But in the summertime, this guy shows up to your deck to eat everything he can find that dripped off the grill, everything out of your garbage can if you put your garbage out too early, and they love birdseed. So if you like bears, which most people do, and you don't want to see us have to remove the bear or whatever, just don't feed them. Don't put donuts out and that kind of stuff. It's a terrible idea. Bears don't normally eat donuts. We eat donuts. We probably shouldn't eat donuts, but we do. But don't feed them. It's the best way to do something for a bear is to not feed it, just let it be wild. So I got this bear pelt. It's kind of hard to show on here because it's so big, but I can show you some parts of it anyhow. Whoop. Hi, Jamie. Were you starting to run out of time?
Oh, no, at all.
Okay. Okay. So we'll show you a little bit about this bear. So this particular bear hide is huge. Its feet are on the ground. I'm about 5'11". This guy's bigger than that. This was a 300-pound bear that was actually hit on Route 61 in the town of Port Clinton. So not that far from Hawk Mountain at all. Back in 1995. I was only about 20 back then. Jamie? Okay. Anyhow, little joke. It's hard to do jokes when there's nobody else there. I can't see if you're laughing. But anyhow, so it was hit by a car. My partner and I at the time, we skinned the bear and we got it tanned so we can show people. And this guy, he's big, but we weighed him. He weighed 300 pounds, which is big. But in Pennsylvania, we have bears that go over 700 pounds. So they get really, really big. This particular hide has a metal ear tag, which is what we do when if we catch a bear and we're going to release it again. We put a tag in each ear. We sometimes tattoo them under the lip. It's a permanent tattoo. We sometimes draw blood if we're doing some sort of test or a hair sample or something. We're going to put a chest tape around his tape to get an estimate of his weight if he's in the field because we can't really weigh him. We'll make sure he doesn't look like he has any mange. If he has mange, sometimes if it's real, real bad and we have the bear in hand and he's already sedated, we'll give him some ivermectin, which is something that helps to cure up the mange. Otherwise, bears can die from mange. And one bear hanging out with other bears that are healthy will definitely pass the mange on to them. So that's something we obviously don't like to see. But if we can help them, we will. So anyhow, that's bears, and hopefully I won't talk too much about bears because we want you to tune in a couple of weeks. I'm doing one exclusively on bears. I think the last critters that I have here, I just thought I'd talk real quick about 3 of the 4 squirrels we have in Pennsylvania. So we got a lot of the big stuff. So this is just a regular old gray squirrel. Then this is a fox squirrel that has a lot of the red there and on the red on the tail. And then I do have a red squirrel. The red squirrel is something you're going to normally see in a conifer type forest, somewhere a lot of pine trees. The only other squirrel that I don't have today is a flying squirrel, which does not fly. It glides. So it has skin flaps in between the front and the hind feet, and it goes from a higher elevation to a lower elevation. They hang out at your bird feeders a lot. So if you have a full bird feeder at night and you wake up in the morning and it's not trash, meaning there's no bear, and it's down a third, then you probably have a whole bunch of flying squirrels, and they show up at night, nobody knows they're there, and they love your bird seed. So with that, Jamie, I think I'm going to stop and see if there's any questions. Hopefully there are. Otherwise, it feels like I've been talking to myself the whole time.
That was awesome. And part of the reason I put my video back on because I wanted you to see that I was like really enjoying and laughing.
Okay, good. Good.
Got some comments in the chat that people were laughing. They're like, this is great, and lots of comments. So that was so interesting and so entertaining as always, Dan. Thank you. So we do have some questions.
Yeah.
So the first question is, what preys on coyote?
We do. We have a hunting and a trapping season. As far as coyote pups, that would be the only thing that's really vulnerable. Coyotes themselves will prey on each other sometimes. I mean, they're territorial. But as far, we don't have golden eagle. There are places where we have a lot of, like out west, they have golden eagles. Golden eagles will eat coyotes. They'll eat bighorn sheep. They'll eat pronghorn. They're a very large avian predator. We don't really have that. Bald eagles don't do that. Bald eagles eat mostly dead things and fish. So they're not going to do it. Not a whole lot preys on coyotes. So coyotes, you have to worry about distemper, rabies. If your populations get too big and you end up with sick critters congregating together. But other than that, for a bear, not that it couldn't eat it, but it's not worth the effort to do that. So coyotes are pretty kind of like an apex predator. Not a whole lot is preying on them, but that's a good question.
All right, thank you. Okay, next question. It's about groundhogs. Is it legal to trap and eat groundhogs?
So did you say, is it illegal?
Or
is it legal?
Is it legal?
Oh, is it legal? So if you have groundhogs in your garden, and you're trying to remove them like as a nuisance thing. So you kind of mix up the questions there. I got to be careful. So if you were to trap one in like a box trap, you could take it somewhere and release it. Now, obviously, you don't want to take it to your neighbor's house and release it because they're not going to be real happy about that. But as far as we don't have a trapping season for groundhogs, they're not what we call a fur bearer. So they're not something that you can lawfully trap during a trapping season. But if you were a hunter and you took your hunter safety course and you hunted them, then you could eat one. But so we don't really have a trapping season for groundhogs unless it's removal, a nuisance critter that you're just going to remove somewhere. Hope that answers your question. But yeah, for most things that you trap or hunt, you have to have a license to do it.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, and a bunch of questions just came in, so get ready.
Okay.
Are elk native to Pennsylvania?
Yeah. So I wasn't sure how many critters to bring up here, but so we do have elk in Pennsylvania. The actual species, the subspecies that we have is the Rocky Mountain elk. That's what we have now. What we originally had in Pennsylvania was a subspecies called the eastern elk, and that elk is actually extinct. We don't have that subspecies anymore. So we have the largest subspecies in the world called Rocky Mountain elk. And in north central Pennsylvania, in about 6 different counties, we have somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 1,200 to 1,500 total elk. We don't individually count them, but we have an estimate, an idea of approximately how many we have. So believe it or not, the last native elk, hopefully I get this right, I'm sure somebody will check and see that I'm right or wrong, but was killed in 1913, and it was killed in Philadelphia County. So go figure that. But we don't have eastern elk anymore. We brought them in from a game farm and from western states, and now we have our own very, very healthy herd of elk. So
wonderful. Okay, where do flying squirrels and fox squirrels live? Like in what kind of habitat?
Sure. Okay, so we have 2 types of flying squirrels. We have a northern flying squirrel and a southern flying squirrel. And I'm not going to make this up because I'd have to look it up to be sure, but I believe we're at the northern end of one of their areas and the southern end of another. So I'm thinking we have northern flying squirrels here in Pennsylvania. They prefer a wooded habitat, so a deciduous habitat. They eat a lot of nuts and they eat insects. Like I said before, they love birdseed. And if you're not sure if you've got them or not, if you get one of those little wildlife cameras and put it on your deck and shoot it out to your bird feeder, you'll be able to see cool pictures of them at night. They have very, very large eyes for such a tiny little critter. They literally weigh ounces. And fox squirrels, we do not have in eastern Pennsylvania. We have them in the central part of Pennsylvania and definitely the northwest part of Pennsylvania, but they are, I've seen them in Center County. I've actually hunted them in Center County where there seemed to be a much bigger population. So they're kind of a much bigger than gray squirrels on average. And they also prefer a hardwoods area, kind of like a gray squirrel, but they have a particular zone, and southeastern Pennsylvania is not where we have them.
All right, thank you. So we have another question about an elk, and it's just clarifying, is an elk a type of deer?
Okay, cool. I see a whole new program, Jamie, on Pennsylvania elk. Yeah. So yes, an elk is a member of the deer family. We have two deer family members in Pennsylvania. We've got whitetails and we have elk. But then in other states, they have moose, caribou, mule deer, that kind of stuff. And then there's weird critters that have been brought in from other countries, Sika deer, S-I-K-A, Sika deer. And then there is a Sitka, S-I-T-K-A, black-tailed deer like out in Oregon, California. So the 2 species that we have in Pennsylvania are whitetails and an elk. Yes, and they're both deer. But so a large adult buck is going to go 140 to maybe 160 pounds, and an adult bull elk will go 800 to maybe 950, 1,000 pounds. So total difference in size.
Yeah. So we have another deer question.
Okay.
To the theme, how serious a problem is chronic wasting disease in deer?
Okay, so it's a serious problem. There's 32 states that have chronic wasting disease. We're one of those states. We're most likely never not going to have CWD. It's very hard to eliminate. What we're trying to do in the agency with different management plans is simply to try to control its spread and to try to determine where it's spreading to. So, so it's a prion. It's a protein, and it affects the like the central nervous system of the deer, so the brain, the spinal cord. So we have not been able to say that, and we're happy that it has not really been able to prove that it goes from like deer to humans. Okay, so we're saying that it's still good to eat the meat. You obviously want to cook the meat, not eat raw meat, and not to eat any part of the spinal cord or the brain, okay, because that's where it's concentrated in. It's been in the United States, so let's say, I think it was Colorado since the 1960s, I believe, is when it was first found, and it was found in a captive mule deer herd, I believe, out in Colorado. So Colorado still has moose, mule deer, white-tailed deer, all that kind of good stuff, and they've had probably CWD, probably the longest that we've known of all the other states. It can be transmitted if you go to an area of Pennsylvania or another state and happen to shoot a deer that turns out to be positive for it, and you bring the whole deer back, and let's say you butcher it yourself and you dump the carcass out in the woods, another animal could eat it or eat something that it drips onto, let's say, some sort of fluids, and literally could get it that way. They could get it, one sick animal, nose-to-nose contact to another one. So it comes back down, Jamie, again, where we're talking about trying not to feed wildlife. You know, people love wildlife. I do too. My whole career has been based on wildlife. But I also know that it's not a good idea to feed them. Simply because it might not be CWD. It could be anything that you have one sick animal. You can quickly spread it to perfectly healthy animals with nose-to-nose contact. They urinate on the food. They defecate on the food. They eat something that's got that on it. And, you know, so CWD it's definitely a problem. It's a problem for people in 32 states. And no state has really been able to get rid of it. We're just trying to keep testing for it. We test throughout the hunting season, as well as any sick-looking animals. But animals get the same symptoms for CWD can be symptoms for other things too. So you can't just see a sick-looking deer and go, oh yeah, that thing. And I've had that many times. I call, I'd go pick something up as a deputy, and they're like, he definitely has CWD. I'm like, okay, how do you know? Well, it has all those symptoms. Well, okay, those same symptoms could be from a lot of different things. And so we do get them tested. And so far, here in this area in Berks County, the closest was a deer that was positive in a captive farm in Lancaster County. And we do like a 10-mile square area around that. And it does encompass some parts of Berks County over by Blue Marsh. But in this area, we have not had any positives like up by Hawk Mountain or down here in Redding where I am. So, but it's definitely a serious thing, something that we're concerned about.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
Sure.
The next question is about fishers. How
Okay.
are fishers throughout the state?
Okay, so let me grab one here real quick. So the fisher, the fisher is an animal that was native to Pennsylvania, and then they were extirpated. So what extirpated means is that, so an animal an animal is native to a particular geographical area, but it is removed from one part of that area, but still found someplace else. So this guy was always found in Pennsylvania, and then you need to know a little bit about what they eat and their habitat that they prefer. They prefer mature forests, and they eat things that hang out in mature trees. So squirrels, okay? So back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, critters that ate your chickens or your rabbits or your domestic anything were called vermin. Everything was vermin, okay? Hawks were considered vermin for sure. You know all about that. And so this guy was considered vermin, like a useless animal. And so anytime anybody saw them, they would shoot them or trap them on sight. There was no season for them in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Also in the early 1900s, humans cut most of Pennsylvania's woods. Penn's woods was cut. So you eliminated their habitat and you killed them on sight. And we basically ran out of any more fishers in Pennsylvania. But they were still found in the New England states. So back in I think it was either 1992 or 1994, we decided to, another word called reintroduce fishers back to where they were primarily found, which is in the north central part of the state. So we got fishers from the New England states, from those state agencies who used licensed trappers using foothold traps to trap the fisher. And then it doesn't break their foot or anything like that. We were able to then release those fishers, and now we have them spread out. So I know for sure that I have seen them in Crumbsville. Okay, so from Center County all the way to Crumbsville, this guy is spread out pretty far. So I don't think that they're in all 67 states yet, because a lot of times they are confused with the mink, even though this guy's way bigger than a mink, but they are confused with the mink a lot, and an otter, even though truly that does not look like an otter hair color or a hair coat. But they're doing really well. They're spreading, and the prey base is there. They eat all kinds of things. How many people do you know that have free-range chickens? Everybody likes chicken. I like chicken. And these guys, if you don't even have them in a pen, this guy's going to find them and he might eat them. So will other predators. But they're doing good. They're doing good.
All right. Thank you, Dan. So we have another question about trapping. Are there guidelines regarding where live trapped animals can be released?
Good question. So we're only talking about wild animals. You're not allowed to catch feral cats, your neighbor's cats, and release them on state game lands. It's illegal. You can actually be fined for doing that. You're not allowed to do that. So when you say animals, we're talking about wild animals. You're also not allowed to buy yourself a giant cage and catch a bear. You're not allowed to do that. Okay? Yeah, can't do that. So you're talking about like rabbits and groundhogs and squirrels and, quote, nuisance things. Let's say you had a neighbor who has a farm, doesn't really care. You could ask them, and that might be a good place to do it. We do have state game lands. You want to be really careful if you're trapping something that you don't get bitten, okay? If you do get bitten, the last thing you want to do is let it go. Because if it is something like a raccoon or a fox or a groundhog and it's sick and you let it go, personally, your only option then is to go to your doctor and possibly get a series of 6 shots. Okay. So you just want to be careful about doing that. But like, I don't want to see all of a sudden the game lands overloaded with every animal that everybody wants to catch, but it is better than just killing them unlawfully or something like that. And obviously you don't want to let them go where somebody doesn't want them, but we do have state game lands. And if they're wild animals like groundhogs and squirrels and rabbits, and things like that. So you got to be careful about things. Like, depends on the time of year. Like if you like animals and you're trying to do the right thing, and you trap a rabbit, and she has 6 or 8 little ones, and they're still in the nest, and you go take her down the road and drop her off at the game lands, you took care of that one, and you also took care of those 6 little ones because they're dead too. So it's kind of a catch-22. You kind of want to be a little careful with how you do it.
Right. Thank you.
Sure.
Dan, there are so many questions. They keep coming in, and to the audience, I'm just going to say, I'm sorry. I know we're not going to all these questions. Good thing, Dan, you're coming back next week for another.
I am.
But let's just, I'll try to squeeze in one more question.
Okay.
Mentioning feral animals, and
yes,
there is a question. Are feral hogs present in Pennsylvania? Okay. And if they are they legal to hunt?
Okay. Yes and yes. We do have feral hogs in Pennsylvania. You do need a general hunting license to hunt them. Sometimes when we know that they're in a particular county or township, There's another agency called USDA Wildlife Services, and sometimes they will be contacted and they will try to go in and either trap them or shoot them. And if we know, if they let us know where they're doing it, we will actually say it is unlawful for a certain time period to hunt them there. Because here's what happens with feral hogs. If you start shooting feral hogs, a hog is a very smart critter. They start figuring it out, and now like a hunter might go in and kill one, but there might be 20. Well, now you just made the 19 way smarter. Where if USDA can go in and put a large cage type, it's actually like a fence type trap, and catch 14 or 15 at a time, it might be better to eliminate that. So USDA would have first dibs at trying to do that, especially if they were trying to help out a farmer, who's taking a lot of damage. So I wouldn't say that we have them like other states, like a lot of western states and southern states. They are overrun with feral hogs. And sometimes those hogs are being released by people because they want to hunt them. So it's not a good idea at all. It's illegal to release hogs. Without a doubt, it's illegal to do that. They can cause a lot of damage, and they can hurt the food industry if those feral hogs that aren't vaccinated come in contact with domestic hogs. They can pass different diseases on, and that could be a huge problem. So you pay $1.99 for a pack of hot dogs, and now you pay $6.99 for a pack of hot dogs, and all because somebody wanted to go shoot a feral hog. So it sounds a little weird, but it truly can affect the food system down the line if some of these states they're overrun, and these feral hogs will eat everything that they can find. Everything. They are omnivores for sure. So you would need a hunting license, and they're not that easy to find, but I know we have some in Pennsylvania. I've never seen one, not in Pennsylvania. In Florida I have, but never in Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Dan. And
sure.
Thank you so much for your fabulous presentation. It was so interesting and so entertaining. Thank you again. And to our wonderful audience for joining us today, thank you so much. It really means a lot to us that you connect with us virtually during these times. And just a reminder, our trails at Hawk Mountain are open, and our brand new outdoor amphitheater is open. So we are resuming some select outdoor programs. So come visit us, check out our website. And we also have many more virtual programs coming your way soon. And here is a sneak peek at what's in store virtually. So tomorrow, Thursday, July 9th, we have Sanctuary Storytime, A Color of His Own at 11 o'clock a.m. with a special guest from a very special chameleon. And Friday, July 10th, we have Support Your Local Pollinator at 4 o'clock p.m. with one of our wonderful volunteers, Barbara Ritzheimer and also Jen Hamp. Next Wednesday, July 15th, we have Dan Lynch again, encore presentation, Pennsylvania Black Bears, and that's at 1 o'clock, so you don't want to miss that. And then next Friday, July 17th, we have the Bats of Hawk Mountain at 4 o'clock p.m. with Aaron Haynes, and he's been doing the bat research at Hawk Mountain with his university. You may have seen our bat kiosk in the visitor center. So we're looking forward to that. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you again soon. Take care. Bye.